you Tynna Mendoza, who is the Director of Programs at Enrich Hong Kong. So Enrich is an NGO that provides financial education for domestic helpers in Hong Kong. So please welcome Tynna.
Thank you, Diana. So I will be multitasking today. I will reveal my true self today. Good morning!
Good morning!
Magandang umaga. Hep hep! Hep hep! Okay, thank you. That's more for me actually. To relax. So good morning all. As Diana mentioned, truth can be quite ambiguous and broad. Actually, I also toyed upon that, the idea of, should I talk about fake news versus real news? Should I talk about, the dichotomies of lies and truth, dishonesty versus truthfulness? But then I thought maybe I should just narrow down to what really speaks truthfully to me, and that is to share my true story. So guys, this is a true story that I will be sharing with you this morning. And this morning I'm also challenging myself for a truth and dare. It's not a truth or dare, it's both a truth and dare. Truth because again, I will be sharing with you my life truth in the most authentic way that I can. And dare because I am standing here in front of all of you early morning, vulnerable. And mustering my strength, my courage to make sure that I finish this talk to the end. That's why I have a cheat sheet with me, because I might get lost in my own story. So please stay with me. This is going to be like a triple T. Tynna tells the truth. Oh, there you go. Tynna tells the truth. And the first truth. This is me. I am a Filipino. I was born and raised in the Philippines to parents who really fought to be middle class. Both my parents, they were not able to complete or finish university. But they were clever with life. They were very resourceful. And they managed to put me and my sister through private school during most of our student life. My father, I recall, he would keep telling this story, his childhood story, that he would sell ice cream in cinemas. And then I realized cinemas then in the Philippines had no aircon, and that vendors were allowed to sell inside the cinemas, and that he was just in grade school during that time. He was a very young part-time laborer. So imagine. But despite this background, both my parents really worked hard. I realized, I've seen how resilient they were, and really trying to build the dreams that they have for us, for them, for our family. So if you're wondering the truth behind this photo, so this was me when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I was in a photo exhibit on the Hiroshima-Nagasaki bombing. Would anyone be aware of that? Which happened in Japan in 1945. So that was a devastating bombing that happened then. If you wonder why I was there, my mother used to work with the Nuclear Free Philippines Coalition. And when I was young, she would always drag me. I couldn't complain, I couldn't reason out. Okay, I'll join you. I'll always tag along with her. And she'll bring me to these events, social gatherings, which I would say has actually somehow helped shape the life and the truth that I am living now. Alright, but growing up, spot me there. I actually grew up with practically religious nuns and sisters. So I was named after them, actually. Maria, Cristina, Margarita, etc., etc. So I actually, honestly, I have 3 first names, all with at least 3 syllables each. And they sound very Spanish or Mexican. How can Filipino? How can that be a very Filipino? But yeah, we were conquered. Philippines was conquered by the Spaniards for like over 150 years. Hence my name. But then again, these religious women, they are very strong, not the ordinary women that you may know. Very inspiring. And I've learned a lot from them. They even tried to convince me to enter the convent, but obviously they failed. And here I am. I grew up with them because my mother also worked with them. My mother never finished college, but since pausing or stopping from that indefinitely, she worked in a welcome house that was run by religious sisters, and they welcomed abused women. So this is where my mom immersed in a life of social work, social service, empowerment, and hard work, I'd say. Hard work because she made a career out of it. She pretty much worked in a non-profit her entire working life in the Philippines. And then, my parents got married. I knew from both of them that they met in high school and that they were student leaders. So I figured they were smart, they were bright, but they weren't able to pursue education. In this marriage, I noticed that my mother was the leader. She was the risk taker. She has the final say. She had the final decision. My father was very supportive of my mother. He actually aspired to be an engineer, but he never got to be an official one. So in the Philippines, he worked in a plastic manufacturing plant. And as they worked together, they were partners in building, the life, the dream that they have for us. That was okay. But then eventually, my parents decided to seek opportunities abroad. That's my father. He decided to work in Saudi Arabia as a factory worker. So, you must have observed, probably some of you know, probably some of you don't know, and you'll be hearing this for the first time, that Filipinos has a long tradition and history of overseas workers since 1940s, 1950s. Pretty much Filipinos are everywhere except for North Korea, to be honest. Yeah. And this has been established in the 1970s and then got ebbed in the 1980s and then eventually picked up again after that Asian economical crisis in the late 1990s. If there's any popular, biggest, and most profitable export in the Philippines, guess what that is? It's the people. It's the Filipino workers. So Filipinos arrived first in Saudi Arabia in 1973. So the first workers that came there were Filipino engineers. And that has been a popular destination for male, female workers. And Saudi actually now is hiring Filipino medical professionals, doctors, and nurses. Middle East in general is also a popular destination for Filipino workers. So this decision of my parents for my father to work abroad actually took toll on the family. We really had to sacrifice, and my father in particular. And it took a significant toll on his mental health. So I knew that he did not manage to stay long and work long in Saudi Arabia. What I could vividly remember is that he's already back home and he was taking long-term medications for his mental health. But notwithstanding that, I really saw the resilience in my parents. They tried so hard to really make sure they still work together to build the dreams for us. Ooh. There you go. There goes my mom. Snow, somewhere out there. Fast forward to 2000s. It was a decade, it was a time of flying colors because my sister and I graduated from college. And it was a huge achievement for my parents and for us. We thought it was great, achievement, yes, we did it. Our parents did it for us. I thought we progressed in life. We're better off than before, right? And we were doing good. Until then my mother decided to seek opportunities abroad. And I couldn't understand why. I really couldn't understand why. I was grappling for reasons. Why? We should be okay. We should be able to slow down. You know, my sister and I should be able to support you somehow or help in the family. But my mother had other plans. So she packed her bags, she left her nonprofit work, and decided to work abroad as a caregiver. It's preempting my photos. Then, anyway, so this decision of my mother to depart was really a puzzle to me. I was an adult already at that time. Again, I finished college, I've started working, and then it dawned on me the two realities of migration lived by my parents that influenced my life and shaped the truth that I have right now. When my father decided to work in Saudi Arabia, there were limited options, if no options for him. And he really struggled, and even both of them struggled to ensure that our families live a comfortable, relatively comfortable life. I can just imagine looking back. I wish I knew what my mother was feeling, thinking at that time. I wish I knew every detail of the migration journey of my father. I wish I could ask them now, but I can no longer do that. But what was clear to me was that my father had to leave and sacrifice his time, his health, his future away from us. Okay. So at the time when my mother decided to leave and work abroad, imagine we had more options. During the time of my father, we had limited to no options. During the time of my mother's departure, we had more options. Clearly, she didn't have to leave because of poverty. Again, we were working. My father had a stable job, actually, as a civil servant. So he was a government employee. They had a property, they had their own house, they were not in debt, we were okay. But my mother left because she wanted to pursue more dreams. She had goals, she had dreams, she was ambitious, really. And if you look at this, my mother there was, she was absent. It's my sister, this is me and this is my father. It was my sister's graduation from nursing. So apparently my sister took another degree. While my mother was working abroad, she put my sister through a secondary, through nursing school. So that, guess what? Why? So that eventually my sister can migrate to and work as a nurse abroad because there's better opportunities for her there. And of course, on top of all of this, I realized that my mother wanted to explore more. She wanted to live her life, live her truth, navigate, her life the way she wanted it. And then I realized, this is the reality of our family. And pretty much the reality and the truth of every Filipino family. And then, who would have thought I would be migrating too? I'm now in Hong Kong. And when I came here, so when I moved here in 2012 to join my husband, I wasn't very sure what I will be doing. My background was in human rights. I've done a lot of community engagements back in the Philippines. I wasn't sure how to align this background with Hong Kong. And then I met Enrich. As Diana mentioned, we are an NGO, and what we do is we empower migrant domestic workers through financial education. So initially, as a Filipino, of course, my initial objective was, okay, I would like to help my fellow Filipino women. But then as I become more engaged with the community, I I spoke to them. I would sit down with them at Chater Road, at parks and at bridges on a Sunday and listen to their stories. More and more, I see the parallels between their truth and my truth. So, migrant domestic workers in Hong Kong, I'm sure you see them on a Sunday. They're phenomenal, right? Some people thought there's a major event happening every Sunday in these bridges because of the presence of the migrant domestic workers. There's over 340,000 of them in Hong Kong. They come here for reasons of, escaping poverty from Philippines or Indonesia. They wanted to support their family members or even extended family members, put their kids to education, set up their own business, have better opportunities. Looking back in the 80s, when my father worked in Saudi Arabia to find better opportunities to earn, have a better life for our family again, had no support, nothing, no means for him to seek consolation or more for abuse and exploitation. But for the migrant domestic workers in Hong Kong, it's pretty much the same actually up to now. They receive very little support on how to save and plan for their future. Financial literacy is not... Have you had financial literacy courses when you were in school? Has your parents taught you, like, come on, we will have every Sunday morning, we'll have financial literacy course and I'll teach you this, right? In the Philippines especially, it's not part of the culture. And we're more towards short-term goals. Okay, next time I will buy this refrigerator. And then next time I will save for the next television. No, it's not really long-term. It's not embedded in our culture. And for these domestic workers who earn a salary of $4,730 per month, they've increased $100, by the way, after 2 years. So from $4,630 pre-pandemic, they now have $4,730. Anyway, they face a lot of pressures because as soon as they arrive, they are already in debt. They are in debt because of recruitment fees. Imagine they are paying money so that they can work here for a monthly salary of $4,730. And they will have to pay this for several months because they need to pay the recruitment agents. And they need to start sending money to families back home because most of them are the breadwinners. In the Philippines, 1 out of 3 households has one family member working overseas. And especially for places like rural areas or relatively, poor areas in the Philippines. Once someone is abroad, we'll be like, yeah, you are the man, you are the woman. We will rely on you. And there's that culture of dependency there. They may also face systemic challenges. They may be prone to scams, to financial abuse, and many of them actually would come back first often when they came. So pretty much coming back home with nothing after all of these financial sacrifices and difficulties. So migrant domestic workers in Hong Kong are actually, from my experience, from what I've seen in the programs that we run and from experience at Enrich, they're actually capable of overcoming these challenges. If equipped with proper tools, knowledge, and support, they can definitely achieve their life goals. They can navigate their own life truths. They can design their life and make wiser choices. This actually brings me back to my mother. Just like my mother, they can also have their options. Poverty that actually deter her from achieving her dreams. My mother chose to educate herself through ways that are accessible to her. She reached out to networks for support for her growth and development. In fact, when she came back, I think she worked for about 5 years abroad. When she came back, she enrolled at a cooking course in a university for their vocational program. So she actually had a graduation, and I was very proud of her. I was here, my sister was there. You know, this time it's my sister awarding her, putting the dog on her. Very, very interesting and happy moment for her. She focused on her goals. She was able to achieve her dreams. She actually was able to fund a full renovation of their house. That's been her dream ever since. She was able to diversify her funds. She was able to acquire another property. She's had like some small investment funds. And then again, she was able to put my sister to school. My sister opted not to use that. My sister opted to stay. She decided to run her business. She has a nursing license, and that's her backup if and when eventually she decides to migrate. But then she has options. And migrant domestic workers, they can also have options. I've seen it. Only if with again, all of these skills, knowledge, and they allow to support themselves and empower themselves as well. You know, the cycle of migration in the Filipino family is real. I've seen that myself. And it's actually real also in the lives of the migrant domestic workers when eventually the daughters of the helpers here replace them and become migrant domestic workers and helpers themselves. And they can choose to continue that cycle or end that cycle. It's up to them. Being a helper forever may not be there forever truth. What do you think? We have a song at Enrich. We composed it in our organization. We say we have the power to move and act, the power to decide to step forward. We have the power to change our lives. So, this is me at Bayanihan Center running some programs and workshops with the migrant domestic worker community. This is our graduation we held pre-pandemic at the Hong Kong Exchange with women who are very, very happy because, number one, they graduated. Many of them have not finished school, while some of them also have finished universities. Some are nurses, some are teachers, but have not had a good opportunity in the Philippines and decided to work here. So I've taken you through the story of my life. I've taken you through my truth, weaved by the migration experiences of my family, my parents. And through time, I realized that my parents had lived a life of meaningful truth and impactful one. Perhaps, actually now I'm realizing, is there a way to redefine truth? Because there can be. Perhaps my parents' truth then was poverty, and they worked through it through time to redefine it and make it work for them to better them, themselves, and us, their kids. Through the actions that they've taken, through the choices that they've made in the past, they were able to change the future of their children. I guess I'm their future. You're seeing me now. And I realize also that living your truth creates ripple effects. I do have that legacy from them. And I hope that I am also making a difference to other people's lives and allowing them to live the truth of their lives. And with that, thank you so much. Thank you for staying with me. If you have questions, if you have any sharings, please share them. Thank you all. Yes. Feel like like I presented a movie, like I'm a movie, but the viewers had the chance to ask, so what's the next story?
I think that's exactly what this is. Thanks so much, Tynna. That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing such a personal experience. And I think there were many messages through that. I mean, namely at the end, right, where you talked about how someone can really change the truth that they're born into and really evolve that themselves. So I want to just open the floor up to any questions first. Okay, right off the bat.
Hi, can you tell me what's your next event and how we can pitch in to help the cause?
Thank you. We do have our website, enrichhk.org. We run workshops on a weekend, mostly on Sundays, because that's when the migrant domestic workers are off from their work. We do have regular core workshops on personal finance. This is actually when they start to learn the skills of budgeting and managing their debts and speaking to their families about money. We have workshops on entrepreneurship, setting up their business back in the Philippines, on investing, knowing the basics of investment tools, funds. We also have a course on Speak Up, which is about confident communication, assertive negotiation, learning to say no to your family members with their unnecessary demands. Interestingly, 100% of our participants actually report that after the workshop, they are now able to say no to family members. It's tricky for some, it's a struggle for many, but we see progress and we see change in behavior over time. So usually on Sundays, www.nhk.org, we have our courses there, we have our schedules. We were doing outreach before. We would go to streets and parks and speak to the domestic worker community, but pandemic. But now we're slowly opening up, and you'll probably see us again speaking to them on Enrich t-shirts. So thank you. I hope that answers your question. Oh yeah, for sure. Yes. Approach me after this. Again, also on our website, there's a way for you to click the donate button. We are encouraging individual donors, any amount. If you are an employer, please sponsor your helper. Consider sponsoring your helper to our programs, to our workshops. We have been here, we just celebrated our 15th birthday, and which is a teenager now, last June. And we have been running this for 15 years. We've grown, we've innovated, and we definitely need support. For us, again, there's over 340,000 migrant domestic workers in Hong Kong. I don't think we've reached about 10 to 15% of that. There's a lot, much work to do. In fact, in 2030, we are anticipating about 600,000 migrant domestic workers because of Hong Kong's elderly population. They deserve to have the right skills. They contribute a lot to Hong Kong economy, 98.9 billion Hong Kong dollars in 2018. So they deserve to actually have a better life. So yeah, please, thank you. Yes.
Hello everyone, good morning. It was a very nice speech. I was really touched by your story. And now I'm having a question. Like you said that in Filipino culture, you always have short-term goals, right? Like you said, television, refrigerator. And I wanted to make a parallel with my culture. I'm from Kazakhstan, which was part of Soviet Union. And for our parents, grandparents, we usually saved, like because of the uncertainty, because one day there's going to be the end of Earth, someday, something like this. Like especially like in Ukraine, actually there's a war, and for our parents it was always like uncertainty. And for 100% of what they earn or what they have, they usually save 80% of it, and they usually save money on themselves. So for the better future and something like that. So because it's mentally, because they are because the atmosphere, the situation made them think like this way. And so it's mentality, right? So for Filipino culture, when you teach a Filipino woman about the financial literacy, how challenging it is to break this mental, something that's in their mind, that's in their culture, and when they graduate from your course, is it usually successful for them, or do they still face some challenges? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing a parallel story. It is a challenge for them. So one course that we would have is Money and Family and Speak Up, which makes them reflect more about their life. There were also strong opinions, actually. So when we share this, it's not to preach, it's to facilitate a discussion, but normally they would have strong opinions on certain things. But no, we're very family-oriented. But no, I'm the only person that they can rely on. Immediately after the workshop, we see changes in knowledge, definitely. But then as I mentioned, change over time, that takes quite a while. Change of behavior takes over time, and that takes quite a while. It's okay. I think for our trainers, I used to train as well. It's okay, let them sit in that reality. And that is why the programs that we offer are continuous. Because we believe that learning should be repetitive, right? And again, in every session, most of the learnings come from the migrant domestic workers themselves. So it's coming from the participants, sharing their own experiences. They're also on different migration journeys. Some of the participants have just arrived in Hong Kong. Some have been here for quite a while. Some actually would want to go home already and retire. So I think it's the realization and learning and knowledge exchange that allows them to think through. A challenge there is, and this is one of the requests that they do always ask us, can you do the same for our family members? Because we now are empowered. We know, we were wiser. But when we go back to our families, it's going to be a struggle. It's a challenge. We will now be the villain in the story. You know, you used to be like this, but how come you're now this? So it takes a while, and we actually try that, and we hope to improve that, because now with the pandemic, we were able to offer our workshops online, and family members abroad in the Philippines, or even another family member who's in another country can actually join. We even had like a couple, one is in Hong Kong, one is in the Middle East, and they joined the workshop together. There was another question.
How hard it is to break this culture, like short term, financial.
Yes, and then when they actually, they go back to the same cycle, right? We've had those. And in which we have like what we call ambassadors. So these are graduates of our programs who continue to stay and volunteer because they wanted to give back. This time they wanted to be the spokespersons of Enrich and share this time what they have learned. And some of them would come to us and say, I feel unqualified to be an ambassador because I just took out a loan. Because I just signed as a guarantor of a particular loan. And we say, this is okay, don't beat yourself up. And then we ask them, what do you think should be, what's the purpose of taking that loan? What made you decide to take that? What do you think can be done so that you will not get into that situation that you were in before? We do not pressure, such as life, right? We falter, we fall, we stumble, and then we stand up again. So this is also what we're trying to make them realize. The financial education that we're offering is not just about plus, minus, divide, multiply, investing. But it's about life decisions at the end. It's the decisions that you make because, again, linked to my talk, it's where life will lead you and will allow you to actually achieve the goals that you have set for yourself and for your family. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
We had one over there.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was very touching and giving us a background of understanding the culture and how it's systemic, what is happening. I would give another parallel here where we are, a lot of us expats, meaning in a way we are migrants. We are privileged migrants. We also want to, have a better life, want to grow, we want to share that growth with other people, our loved ones or whoever that is. So we are in the same boat. And that realization for me, as an employer too, it's even bigger. Like I felt this, but right now it became like an aha moment. That we are in the same boat. So my question, as an employer, like I already wrote my helper, like you're going here. I hope if she agrees. But we've been talking about finance, and yes, my helper also made some decisions that are heartbreaking. How can employer help their domestic worker, their babysitter, whatever they work? What is that you hear from the ladies that they really would help them and that they really desire? Because it's a very complicated relationship. It's an employer-employee relationship, but we are almost like family, but not. And yes, the employer, like doesn't want to pay too much, but doesn't want to pay the minimum because it doesn't feel right. And so yeah, if you have any advices, of course,
To employers as well. And most of the time, this is when their helpers come to us for financial counseling because of indebtedness. Really, they are trapped in the cycle of debt. What we would usually encourage the employers to do is to sit down with your helpers. Again, employers may have different approaches on how they will, on their relationship with their helpers, but having an open discussion, sitting down with them, listening to their stories. In fact, many of the workers would say to us and tell us, ma'am, my realization is that I'm very lucky with my employer because she listened to me. We sat down and she listened to me. Just having a listening ear is one. But there's also, we have this domestic worker influencer who would always share with different migrant domestic worker NGOs a collective, feelings or sentiments of the migrant domestic worker community. And she would say, number one, respect. Respect in many aspects. It's treating your helper as an employee. Many of us here maybe are employees. I am an employee. Imagine yourself as an employee being treated disrespectfully. It's understanding their context. It's understanding where they're coming from. So one of the questions that we would usually receive from employers is that, why are they in debt? They're not paying apartment fees. They're not paying taxes. They're not, and then they don't get to have the time to sit down with their helpers and actually understanding it from the helpers themselves. So that's one practical advice that I would say. There's one another on top of my mind. Boundaries are also important. So I think setting boundaries at the very beginning is important, and communicating it clearly to your helper. Again, these are smart ladies. They know, they would understand. And I think doing that actually gives them reassurance and also makes them feel that you appreciate them and respect them. When in terms of finances, I would say, and this is what I saw with the employers that we have been receiving and we have been talking to, sit down with her. Try to ask her to talk you through her financial situation. There are employers who, upfront, they would say, if you have loans, I will not hire you. But I would say, please take some more time to listen and to understand. And of course, again, once there is an agreement, there is a clear communication, if this happens, this is why it might be the consequence, then that's clear. We do not have a hotline for employers, but we do welcome you to reach out to us if you have any issues or concerns on with your helpers. We do have resources for for employers that are available on our website. These are 10 tips, which was co-developed by a former co-manager. 10 tips for employers, and yeah, I can definitely, please feel free to access that because that will be helpful to employers and domestic workers.
Yeah, and thank you for that question. That was very beautifully articulated because I imagine many of us who do employ domestic helpers have thought about that as well. I'm conscious of time, and I know Ollie's got one last question. You wanna ask?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay, last question.
Tynna, that was beautiful. Thank you. I think what was really awesome was you sort of shared truth at different levels. You shared the truth of your like personal story. Sorry, I didn't know my things. Sure. The truth of your personal story, and then like the economic truths as well, right? Like on both sides.
Sorry.
Just gotta move away.
And I'll move away from the speaker.
No, I think you should move away because the two microphones will interact.
We're too close. And I think what's also interesting is you presented migration as opportunity, right? Maybe one question I have, and this is a little bit naive, I've always wondered is how much the truth of the challenge of that migration, right? So you said maybe the abuse, maybe the challenges actually that Filipinos face as they move around the world. How much of that flows back home, right? I'm almost thinking of the story of your dad, right? When he came back, right? How much of the truth came back with him, and how much of that story sort of spreads also in the local community to really sort of make clear also the challenges of migration.
That's very interesting and indeed naive, but I'll try to answer that question. So with this diaspora, I would say, with the migration happening in the Philippines, well, number one, there are many, I say, impacts, layers of impacts. There's social impact, there's economic impact, there's macro and micro impact. And I'd say, first, indeed, economic impact is significant. We've seen that in the Philippines. The reserves of the Philippines have actually come from the remittances, from overseas remittances of overseas Filipino workers. That's definitely one. Social impact, I would say family, from my experience, and magnifying this to the experiences of Filipino families, it's estrangement. So, I was in the airport. I knew I was sending my father abroad. But I just thought, okay, that's it. And then, when he came back, because he's had mental health issues, I wasn't sure if I know him, if I still know him, no? And while I knew that my parents were still together, I wasn't actually even sure if they still know each other well, if things have changed. Even my father has been away for a while. And I've seen that also in the migrant domestic worker community in the stories that they were sharing. And also family members have gone abroad. I do have a lot of them. Some of them would share, you know what, as soon as I arrive home, I was the one actually who built that house. I funded it, but I didn't have a room. They've pretty much, conquered it and owned it, and I don't see myself in it. Somehow I feel like, a closet, and they just walk past by me. And that's why many migrant domestic workers who were planning to go back home finally retired because they cannot stay here. They're bound by their contract, and they cannot obtain permanent residency. Once they're back home, they decide to just come back into Hong Kong and work and retire here. Anyway, for the longest time they've been here, they've already established friends, they've adapted to the lifestyle. Back home, it's much slower. They feel like they're getting more sick, It's fast-paced here, it's slow-paced there. I think that's one that I can definitely relate. It's the estrangement in the families. In the communities, and even extended families, there is an expectation that if you're abroad and you come back home, you are the best. You're like, you know. And for many migrant workers, there is that self-expectation that I don't want to come home. You know, that people looking at me and say, is that what an OFW, that's how we term it, an overseas Filipino worker look like. So even if they struggle, they have their real struggles in another country, when they go home, they need to present themselves in such a way that they're successful. So migrant domestic workers here every Christmas normally would line up, queue up in lending companies and take out loans, because they will either send this back home as a Christmas gift, or they will take a holiday to be with their families and use some of this cash to treat everyone, including local officials. Yeah, that's the truth. So yeah, this is usually what happens, and then that message that we're bringing across unconsciously is that they're okay, they're well off, they can fund any requests, etc. And at the same time, they're perpetuating that culture of dependency, and at the same time, they're estranging far and far away from their family members. It's not just about money, essentially. At the end, and recently we piloted a workshop called Going Home for Good. It's about return and reintegration of migrant domestic workers and preparing them to go back, because eventually they really need to go back. Interestingly, the highest responses were they're worried about the relationship that they need to rekindle with their families once they go back home. I hope that answers your question, only as naive as it is.
Thank you so much, Tynna. One last round of applause, guys, for a wonderful